All right, good morning, everyone. We might get a few more folks in, but just in case, we'll start her up anyway. I know it's a busy time of year. Everyone gets a little tired this time of year. March, mid-March is always a tough time. Here in Newfoundland, we actually don't get a family day, so a lot of people haven't had a day off now since Christmas. So I really appreciate the fact that you're taking some time out of your day to focus on yourself, i.e. through this webinar. So today we're going to do the secondary portion of career management and personal development. We're going to talk about some different things. We sort of talked about a little bit about the basics of the process, the stages, the process, etc. last time. We delved into a few other pieces, and we're going to focus sort of in those areas again, so the strengths and interest and development areas, so what you need to focus on. We're going to talk about networking, we're going to talk about additional things you can take on, and then we're going to talk about how to have conversations with your leader around your own development. What your plans are, what your career goals are, and also if you're a manager or a leader, what is it that you need to ask? What do you need to actually work on with your own teams? Because each leader in an organization, for all their direct reports, you should know exactly what their career goals are. The person should know their gap areas, so things like that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and how you can have that conversation. So last time, just a few little ones to sort of get us back in the groove. We've got careers now. So in other words, what has changed? Before it was a straight ladder, up into the sky. Like you had to go up one rung, next rung, etc. But actually these days it's very, very different career paths than they used to be. So for your own development, you can actually look at moving laterally. So if you're in a certain side of the business, say you're in claims and you want to start, geez, maybe I'll get into personal lines, or maybe I'll start in the commercial side, or maybe I'll get into a different aspect. Maybe I want to do business development, right? More of account manager type things. So whatever it is, you can laterally move around in an organization. You can do the traditional move up. You can also relocate. Maybe there's an opportunity in another area. Maybe you're in a smaller office and you can relocate to a larger one, or vice versa. Maybe you're in a large one and you take on maybe leadership or a more senior role in another one. You can start sort of playing around with some different things, figuring out where you want to go, maybe doing some job shadowing. You can realign your role, and you can also enrich your role. So you could actually stay in the same role, and how can that be much better? So if you could say, I love my job, I don't really want to change it, but what can you shift to be able to take it to the next level? Okay. So again, we talked very quickly, we just talked about, the ideal scenario. So I call purpose in this one, just so I use this in different things, but it's essentially the same principle. So what is it you really want to do in your life, right? What is it that you need to do? A lot of people, again, don't fall into insurance, that side, risk management, but it's an amazing, amazing industry to be in. So, and you can move around in different aspects, especially on the broker side as well. There's so many different areas. So what you love to do, can you match that with what your strengths are? Looking at what actually is a need out there. Just because I love to paint, it may not work out in the insurance industry as an example, but maybe that creative side of you can. And then can you get paid for it? Is it something that they're willing to pay for? Maybe it's not a skill that's as sought after. So you have to realize, okay, maybe I'll get paid, but not as much as I really need to be paid for what I want to get out of my life. So again, you got to really sort of think about all those. We're going to delve into a little bit more of that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those conversations today. So last time we talked a little bit about gaining insight, just to sort of do the last couple of slides we did. So in terms of looking at our steps to career success, right? What do you need to do? First of all, you got to sit back and figure out what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? What's my particular situation at the moment? So I sort of mentioned around how can you get to know yourself better? Can you do some self-assessments? Just have that self-reflection. Can you ask other people, what do you think of me? Right? When I've worked with people transitioning in a career or within an organization, how do you understand how you're being viewed? Which we'll talk a little bit more about later with branding. So how do you look at your accomplishments? One of the biggest things I see, which I mentioned before, was people don't actually understand why they're good. So knowing your job and what you did is only one piece, because there's thousands of people around North America that could do the same job. But what makes you unique and specific? What makes you better? What did you successfully accomplish? So really understanding what that means for you, understanding how you can actually do that to actually start selling yourself a bit as well. So in terms of those accomplishments, a couple of things sort of I threw up as the last slide we finished on last time, was taking some time and actually thinking about, what have I done? right? So when I'm working with folks in terms of transition, we talked about, so what is it exactly that you've accomplished, right? Have you done any of these following? And I have a big long list longer than this, but this gives you an idea. Have you saved money for your area, for your department, for your organization? Did you save a client? Maybe, is there something you did that specifically helped in achieving or collecting money in a different way? Or is it efficiencies around systems? Or is it around saving a client, getting a new client, introducing a new client? Whatever that is, those are all valuable. And those are all the things that you have to take responsibility for and making sure other people know. Now, that might sound a little uncomfortable, and we'll talk a little bit more about it afterward. First things first, figure out all the things that you've done well, right? Think about your entire career, not just the last couple of years, right? People often need to know, including yourself, in terms of selling yourself or really having that confidence, is look at all the things I have done, right? That actually makes me valuable, okay? So in terms of expressing your value, how do you need to look at that? With value, it's only relevant to the organization / role that you're in or want to be in. Okay, so your skills and knowledge and your ability, your experience, all those pieces play in, right? And I'll throw in there also accomplishments, right? All the accomplishments, not just what you know, but how you've actually utilized that to the success for the organization. How does that play into what the organization or the team needs? I might have done something 5 years ago, which maybe due to technology is irrelevant. Doesn't mean it wasn't valuable then, but is it really of value now? So what's the real value? Understanding the value plays into, do you understand what the organization is trying to achieve in the next 5 years? If I could go to a CEO of a company, an owner, operator of an organization, or even an office, I could say, within your branch, here's what I know you're trying to get into this area. Well, let me tell you, here's some experience I have in that, or here's my knowledge, or I've got a great deal of connections in that. If I'm a CEO or if I'm a senior person and I'm looking at you thinking, wow, they could open up some doors, or they've probably got some knowledge there from their past role that could be really helpful, right? What is it you bring that's valuable now and in the next, say, 5 years? Okay, so really start thinking about that, understanding and appreciating that, because of course, it's like anything. If I bought a camera 15 years ago, it was the best of the best, it may not be relevant anymore. It's no different than our skills and our competencies. We have to keep them fresh. Don't underestimate the value of something you did 15 years ago, but the fact that you can actually achieve things is great. It's just the relevancy of it now. Okay, and as we get older, like myself, when you're in the 25 years plus, there's lots of things in there you can pull on. It's a matter of choosing which pieces make the most sense for that particular role, that particular person, that particular organization to speak to. If you're a little newer in your career, think outside the box. I see a lot of people not even considering their stuff they do outside of work. That is valuable. Maybe you're highly connected in a certain industry. Maybe you're on a nonprofit board that has value in a certain way. Maybe there's people on that board you can introduce to people. Where is your value, right? And how does it play out? And how can they use that when they look at people in the organization to either enhance your current role or to take you to the next level? So when you look at SWOT, something obviously a lot of people know about. So if you don't, it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Used a lot, and I've shown it to you before, in sort of been used for probably 30 years now in the business and in terms of strategy. But it's no different with strategically looking at your career. So if you think about it from strengths and weaknesses, are more about you. Opportunities and threats are more about the external. So if you think about yourself, what are you really good at? What makes you unique? Where's that value? And what would others say? Because I might think I have this great strength. I might have this amazing ability to do something, but does actually anybody know that? Do they know that I can do that? Do they know that I significantly helped in a certain area because of that strength, right? Do they know that I introduced the account manager to this person and it ended up with the organization bringing on a nice new client? Right? So again, we'll talk about that after, is how do you sell yourself a little bit in communications as well. But understanding what your strengths are, understanding what's really makes you you and uniquely valuable to this organization or whatever organization you're looking at. In terms of weaknesses, terrible word, but that's the W. I would say gaps or areas of development. So what development opportunities exist? But number one, you're on this call. So that's part of it, right? Taking ownership, looking at development opportunities, and even trying to create some, right? A lot of organizations don't have the benefit of like an IVANS. that offers these pieces. And so people are kind of scrambling to find something. So number one, IBANs. Number two, is there anything specific outside of that sort of insurance element that you need? How do you actually take advantage of those? And believe it or not, there's things online, there's webinars online that are free, there's things you can access to fill those gaps. But you also got to know what those gaps are, right? So I might think my gaps are A, you might think my gaps are B. So really understanding what those are, and we'll talk about how to create, understand that with your manager or your leader. Having said that, there are colleagues of yours you can ask. There's people, you've worked with in the past you could ask, like, what will be one development area for me? And as many of you know, in terms of feedback, a nice way to say it so it doesn't freak people out, because no one's like, oh God, I got to talk about their gaps or their weaknesses. It's just, what's one thing I could do to be effective, or what's one thing I could do more or less of to be effective, more effective in my role or moving forward in the organization, or to go to the next level, whatever that looks like for you. And one of the most important ones, right? I might say there are 5 or 6, but maybe one of them really isn't that significant in this organization. So understanding that is really important. Opportunity. So what's out there? What do you keep an eye on? You have to really own your own career. So what can you leverage, right, to be better? What opportunities are there for employees with your skills, right? So what actually is out there to be had? I say to everyone, and I don't care where you are, where you're working currently, everyone should always keep an eye on what's going on in your market. And that's no different internally. How do you find out what's happening? How do you find out if there is a succession plan? How do you find out how to get on that succession plan, right? How do you understand what is important for the next role, whatever role that may be, right? Then you look at threats. So what could pose a risk to your career development? So can anyone think of any potential risks to someone's career? If you can put it in the chat. Anything, it's not an easy one, but what might come to mind? One thing that could affect your career, your role. No thoughts? No one at all. There we go. There's a good one. Downsizing. Absolutely. This is change. We've talked about it before. It's constant. There's no even change. It's how organizations evolve. How, when the markets are, do you have a hard market or a soft market? How does that play out? What happens in the general economy that you're in, right? So how do those things actually affect the organization? And on occasion, things have to downsize, right? They have to what's called retrench and pull back to kind of weather the storm, right? To be more resilient. It happens. It could be downsizing. It could be acquisition, which I've been through in your industry. Organizations getting gobbled up or merging to compete with the bigger ones, whatever it might be. So there's so many things that can happen in terms of your career, and maybe the new organization doesn't have it, or maybe they have it in spades, and it comes down to who's going to be the best person. So needless to say, through this exercise, you can start thinking about how do you actually position yourself should this occur, and there is a position to be had to be the one to get it, right? How does that start? It starts now. You start talking about yourself and branding yourself now so that these things happen. If there is an opportunity for you, you're like, wow, we cannot get rid of Heather, because even though that position's gone, we just think her skills are so applicable to our organization. Or wow, she's talented, we got to keep her on, right? So those are wonderful ones. And it's interesting. So Gwynne Dyer, who's a well-known speaker and I guess really influential around the world, and he came up with the concept, which is a little frightening to think about in a career perspective, which I may have mentioned before. But in the next 20 years, half the jobs out there right now will be automated, which made sort of everyone in the 900 people in the audience or whatever take a breath, gasp, like, wow. And his predictions, so to speak, have actually been quite accurate. And actually, when you look at other research as well, what's going to become automated? What piece of my job can become automated? But what are other areas that can't? What are other areas that I can definitely add value that probably won't be taken on by a robot anytime soon? So yeah, looking at that, understanding what could be a threat. So if you're beginning of your career, or you're even just 10 years into your career, what are some things that you can do to protect yourself, right? So what are the threats out there? Is there something you can take on that's a little different or new? It might be kind of scary. Having said that, it's something basically to be able to weather the storm when things start changing, right? And let's face it, every industry has changed between technology and the way we do things. So excellent. All right, so moving on. When you're looking at opportunities, you got to think about what you can do that's outside the box. So if you I've heard people say, well, nothing's really come up for an opportunity. Well, then sometimes you got to create an opportunity. One of the biggest ones I see could be mentors. Whether it's I used to run a formalized mentorship program, but having said that, are there informal ones? Is there someone in the organization that you can tap into who's maybe very well received, very looked up to, who can help you in your own development, right? Mentorship, I won't get into all of it, but mentorship can absolutely be a very confidential space as well, depending on the person. You have to set it up the proper way. So in terms of committee work, project work, is something, if you know the organization's thinking about a certain area or something they're going to try a little differently, could you get in a committee? I mean, committee might be not the right word. Is there a project or something they're doing? Maybe you can donate some of your time. Maybe you can say, look, I can squeak out 2 extra hours. Is there any way I can be involved? Not only does it get you in the know, does it give you more skills, it also, you can show how much you want to be involved and you're committed, right? It shows initiative. So you can have an informational meeting or an interview with someone internally, right? So yeah, what do you think? What do you think of me? Informational meeting is more just sharing what's going on, what's happening, kind of picking someone's brain. You could job shadow. Interestingly, I had a client, a coaching client, who was lucky enough to do some job shadowing in an industry that doesn't necessarily like that. So it was very much an in-house person who wanted to go out going around with the account manager. So it took a while, and it took some, initiative. It took some, here's what I'm going to get out of it, a real sell. But she did get out on the road, and it went extremely well. And the clients really reacted well to her. So they're now thinking, yeah, this could be the next step for her. But again, she had to take that on. So how do you actually create those opportunities? Networking, which we'll talk about in a minute. It could be as a comment, maybe your particular team is fully staffed and someone else isn't. Can they let you go for a couple of months to go help out in another department, another area, take on something new from a stretch perspective? Maybe there's an area that you're interested in, or training others, right? And volunteering. So your brand. This is a big one. And so I want to just get your mind wrapped around brand, because it's not, I'm sure you understand from your own organizational brand, but I want to kind of think outside the box here. Let's just talk about brand. So tell me about, when I say Starbucks, what are some things that come to mind when you think of Starbucks? Put some stuff in the chat. And just to make sure to mute everyone, because there's a few people I can hear on the call. So what is Starbucks? Give me a couple words or phrases that you think of. I know one I think of. Let me know one that you think of when you think of Starbucks. Come on, I know there's 13 of you on the call. I know one of you can write down something for Starbucks. All right, I'm giving up on you. I'm not very happy this morning. Come on, folks.
There's all kinds in there, Heather.
What's that?
There's all kinds
We're all
in there.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding. Thank you so much for letting me know. Goodness gracious, my screen froze. Just give me a second. Technology. Oh, look at you guys. You're awesome. I changed my mind. I judged. Awesome. Love it. Automation. Oh my goodness, look at all these. Money, pricey, expensive. Love it. Look how good you guys are this morning. You guys obviously had your coffee this morning, unlike me. So yes, thank you so much for that. So costly, expensive comes to mind. Now, expensive also has a brand element to it of kind of a little decadent, right? So why does Starbucks do so well, right? Well, they're everywhere, and it has a sense of decadence to it. It has a sense of, ooh, I'm going to treat myself, right? It kind of has those elements, but again, we still buy it on occasion. Hopefully not every day, because that would be getting quite expensive. So my system is now unfrozen, I promise. So next one, Tim's. What do you think of Tim's? What's their brand tell you or say to you? Yes, I love that. Affordable and Canadian. They've done a great job of showing the Canadian experience. If you know any of their ads, all the way they position themselves, I loved the one with, I can't remember, it was a little fella who was out. I should have looked it up before I got on here, but he was out on the ice. I think he was disabled, and he got out on the ice, and it was just, I think that was the one. I think so. Anyway, it was a one getting on the ice in the morning and having your coffee and stuff. And it was lovely. It was just that Canadian experience, right? So they have that brand. What about Addictive? Yeah, I love that. Thanks. What about McCafe? So they were newer to the market. So what's their brand? What are they selling? What is McCafe selling? I think they're still trying to get their brand sorted. I kind of have an idea. When you see the ads for McCafe or they try to sell it, what does that look like? Yeah, coffee. It's supposed to be good tasting coffee, so it's definitely a taste perspective. They sell it as the best tasting coffee. I've heard people say it in a couple of. I'm involved with the Ronald McDonald House here, and just when you hear about McCafe, and it's a pride of taste. Staying relevant, excellent. Yeah, and it's that convenience piece, right? So because what's going to happen if you go in for like a really cheap, good tasting coffee, you're probably going to buy something else. Right? So it has that element of convenience that we're here and hey, we've got some good tasting coffee. So if you were hiring one of these, let's just for fun, right? You'd be looking for different things. You're going to look at them differently, right? Doesn't mean it's all true. It doesn't mean that the latte at Starbucks is actually more decadent than the latte at Tim Hortons. What it means is that I'm buying you, or I'm actually going to hire you or promote you or develop you because I think something about you. Okay? So brand, you might think, oh, it's not real, but yeah, it's real to the person that has the belief about you. Right? So if I have an idea of how I see somebody in the market, how I see someone through their presentations or their LinkedIn profile, whatever it is, there's a brand perspective. There's a personal brand. There's a career potential brand. Is this person actually someone? Because I can tell you right now, when I'm working with leaders and we talk about their teams, sometimes they've already discounted people. Sometimes they've got someone up on a pedestal, and neither of them are actually accurate when I actually start working with the team. But it's a perspective no different than those judgments we have about people. We have the same principles when we look at their development. Okay? So you got to think about that. It's not like trying to make yourself out to be something different than you are. It's highlighting yourself in the right way so they know what brand you are. Okay? So knowing your brand. Now I'm going to go through a time ticks on this one. There's so many things to talk about. I'll try to pick up the pace a bit. So exercise, know your brand. What are the things that you show up as? So presentation and presence. How do you show up? Do you show up being sort of humble and humility? Is that your brand? Is it confidence? And absolutely we can do that. Is it I'm going to be a talker or I'm going to be a listener? Is it around style? Is it around and substance, right? Is it more sort of high level? Is it lower level? Is it more in the weeds? What is it? How do you present yourself? And how do you need to present yourself? The type of work you do. How would people characterize that? Are you like that detail-oriented person that's going to make sure everything's perfect? Are you going to be someone who's efficient, right? Like, yeah, that's good enough. We're moving on because we got to get the next goal met, right? Are you adaptive? Are you able to sort of shift on the fly? What is it that you want to be and what fits with your organization as well, right? Your strength is one thing, but also what the organization needs. Are you participating in meetings, right? And if you're someone who's highly introverted, as an example, I would really push you to not participate a lot, just maybe just once in a meeting, you make a comment or you ask a question. Could be just as impactful, right? Influence, collaborating, how you work with others is significant. I can tell you right now, in any role, whether you're dealing with a client or your internal team, unless you're a programmer who works at home, you have connection with people. Don't underestimate the importance of that. You could be the most technical person on the planet, but you may not get to the next level if you can't learn to do that. And you can learn if it's not your strength, right? Do you have a bigger, larger, broader perspective? So yeah, so how do you, if you want to get to the top, you darn well better start thinking about the broad perspective of our organization, what the strategy is, how it fits with the market, what's going on in the market, how our organization needs to shift to adapt to the market, right? Just like you mentioned with McDonald's, if they're going to get in that market, how do they adapt? They be more adaptive. And then how you are outside, right? How are you online is another one. And how are you involved with other things outside the organization, which could be committees, teams, it could be IVANS as an example, right? How do you actually show up that? It shows commitment if you can do that. So what is your brand in those areas, right? What do people see you as? So you really should think about that, whether you're at the beginning or, higher up in your career in terms of experience. But again, if you want to take it to the next level, that's what you got to think about. So your network, we've talked about networks before. So I'm going to when you think of networking, not everybody likes that. It kind of makes some people feel really uncomfortable. Now, if you're on the account management side or you're a business development person, this is second nature to you. Not for most, okay? So again, networking doesn't have to be a lot. I was with actually an executive, amazing person yesterday, and we talked about networking in terms of creating influence in the organization, very large organization. And I do this at every level. I don't care if you're, at the just got in the company and you're beginning your career. Who do you need to influence? Who are the people that make the difference in the organization? Who's the decision makers that you need to influence? And it might be just within your department, right? Don't think too high. Don't think the CEO is going to actually have an impact if that's 9 levels ahead of you, above you, right? Who actually can actually speak on your behalf? Who do you need to create a relationship with? Who do you need to actually showcase your brand with? Okay, it might be one person that you need to focus on. It might be 2 or 3. It might be 5. Who are those people you really need to think about? It's planned. It's purposeful. You actually come up with a strategy around it. It's not a strategy that's inappropriate, like you're going to stalk the person or anything. It's a strategy in the sense of how can I possibly connect with that person? Maybe there's an event you can go to and happen to talk to them. And again, we'll talk about how you talk to them in a minute or what you might need to say. Having said that, how do you actually get them to notice you, to see you, and represent the brand you want? Okay, so you really got to do your research, understand who's there, because just because someone's at a high level doesn't mean they're going to have the influence you want. You might have someone who's been in the organization for 30 years and everyone goes to, this is one of these people that you want as your mentor, but it may be also the person that can put a good word in for you. Okay, so in terms of different strategies, I'm just going to whip through a few here. So join industry organizations such as IVANS, for example. How do you go to their events? LinkedIn, don't underestimate the value of LinkedIn in terms of just connection. It's great research as well if you're trying to figure out what's going on out there and in the market. It could be for new clients as an example. Getting yourself known is really significant, whether you're staying in your job for 30 years or you're going to be gone in a year or gone to a different organization. It doesn't matter. It's a great tool that everyone's using it. It's not Facebook, it's LinkedIn, very different. Now, this isn't for everyone, but can you attend, not necessarily speak at, conferences and seminars? I might go to seminar or conference, and that's how I created, a little bit of my own brand by speaking and interacting with people in that regard, but attending them. Just even if you're a little quiet and you don't know how to network very well, simply talking to somebody or the 2 people you're sitting next to at lunch, asking them a couple of questions, getting them to know you, and maybe afterward linking in with them on LinkedIn. Just simple little things to sort of get yourself out there. And someone might say, oh yeah, I met Heather at this event. She seems great. All of a sudden, the senior person's like, oh, they're getting out there, right? They're really making a difference. So volunteering can be extremely beneficial. Writing or sharing articles. Now, the articles could also be on LinkedIn, right? Understanding your industry, finding something interesting. I find a lot of people from the insurance industry will share articles on LinkedIn, and I've actually picked up a few and reshared them because I thought they were great articles. It may not be just about the insurance industry, it just might be in general, right? That's your brand. What you look at in LinkedIn and what you share or reshare is something that's showing up in your own way in your brand, right? How you want to be looked at. Make sure you go to work events. If something's happening, you can be involved, do your best, obviously, recognizing you can't go to everything. Again, I spoke to it, know your influencers. I think the 30-second summary is really important. People say elevator pitch, whatever. What do you want to be recognized for? What is it you love about your job? What are some things within your organization or could be externally? How do you want to be presented, right? So understanding what you do, the value that you bring, and your accomplishments in your back pocket so you can pull them out if needed, right? Sharing something with someone can be significant and just short and sweet. How can you be a resource in a certain area so that you're known to be a go-to person? It could be in terms of mentorship, bringing new people on. It could be a technical aspect. It could be a client aspect. What a resource are you? That creates value, right? Sharing best practice. If you go to a conference or something, make sure you share that information within the organization, not just LinkedIn. How do you share things out there that people can start going, oh, they're probably in the know. If someone's in the know, what are the chances that we're going to want to, maybe if there's a merger acquisition, they're going to be the ones not going to be kept on, right? So in terms of just a couple of things around, I'm just going to whip through these quickly for time, make sure we keep going through, but take care of yourself. You got to take care of your own career. Don't expect others to do it. You got to be keeping watch. Now, it sounds exhausting. I probably make this stuff sound a little bit tiring. It can be simple goals you pick for yourself. What's one thing you could do this month that you wouldn't have normally done? What opportunities out there for you? Now, I know this time of year is tough, but again, not as many things happen for events in the summer, as an example, if that's a slower time for you. One thing that often defines is I find, over the years that people who make mistakes or something happens or they have a career setback, right? Just like someone mentioned earlier, but what if they have a downsizing? That doesn't define you because that's so common these days. We all make mistakes and we all have setbacks in some way, shape, or form in our careers. Every single one of us. We all have them. So how do you actually learn from them? How do you actually look at it as an opportunity? At the time, often it doesn't feel that way, but you really have to start looking at it from a positive perspective. Okay, so what did I learn? What will I not do again? What could I have done differently to prevent it? You're in risk mitigation, risk management, right? What could you do differently? And owning mistakes, right? I mentioned on the call, one of these webinars, a while ago, I made a very large mistake in one organization I was working in years ago. And it went right to the top. And I fixed it all in 24 hours. Having said that, I was mortified. I was completely mortified for 6 months that I did this and this happened. And I couldn't believe I didn't catch it. Having said that, when I got my performance review, I had stellar performance because it wasn't the fact that I made the mistake. Now, it could have been, had it gone differently, who knows? But I did end up fixing it, and it all's well that ends well. I felt horrified, but they were actually most impressed, and that's one of the reasons why I actually took on some additional responsibility about a year later. They liked my style, right? The brand, how I was showing up, and what they knew to expect from me. That was something that actually helped me elevate my career and my brand. Your connections, right? So if you connect with somebody, maintain the connections. Establishing is one thing. Getting it, say you go to an IBANS event and you meet with somebody or talk to somebody or someone has some interesting perspectives on the industry or what's happening or who knows what it is. It could be a local community event. How do you keep those connections, right? How do you actually keep them so that they just don't fade away? One thing I also notice in terms of career is know how you're showing up in your brand in terms of positivity. So something's just hit the fan. Some people are just going to sit there and say, you all know this. Some are very critical and say, well, we could, I told you so, this shouldn't have happened. Let's look at the positive piece in terms of how we fix it, right? So positivity doesn't mean, everything's gravy and perfect and wonderful. It means how do you look at it from, there's the reality, that's what happened. How do we move on? How do we fix this problem? Right? Saying, it's nothing we can do, or coming into, well, that's just the way it's been for 20 years. That's not the right approach. That's not going to help you elevate and show a brand that people are actually going to want to elevate within an organization. Look at yourself positively. If you're self-critical, how can you work on that? There's lots of things online you can read. There's lots of self-awareness. There's coaches out there that can help. If you're struggling in terms of your own positive image, really embrace that, and women are famous for that as well. In terms of not thinking we can do something, and this is all research-based, not just because I'm a woman, but we'll often not look at a promotion because we don't know everything. We actually, as women, will often, and think of this if you're a man as well, right? Are there women underneath you you're trying to mentor? And sometimes women, a lot of times women will say, well, I only know 80% of the job. Is that enough? Right? Where the man might say, well, I know 20%, I can figure the rest out. So that confidence piece of, yeah, I can take it on. Yeah, I can do that. Maybe think about that, because that is a difference between men and women, as much as many of us are similar. So self-discovery assessment, assess yourself, set goals and set actions. And in an ideal world, you share them with your colleagues, with your boss, whoever it might be, or your mentor. So sharing goals. So sharing, period. All right, one of the things I've noticed in terms of career succession, wherever that is, whether it's enhancing your current role or moving on or moving around or up or down and all around, is the fact that we assume people know things. We assume people know all the great work we've done. And this is where it gets awkward for some people. And so I have to really try to help them see beyond the fact that they think it's great. That should be enough. No, it's not. People around you need to know the great things that you do. And this isn't about, oh, yay, look at me. This is about, how do you show your brand in the right way? How do you actually show up and say, yeah, I've made a difference in this area? Or maybe a senior person, that person you want to influence, how do you bring it up? Not necessarily in a obnoxious way, but how do you bring it up to say, I was involved with that project. How did you find it? We were pleased with the success. Or, gee, I found this out when I was out at an IBANS function. I had this person I was sitting next to, or when I was out in another committee on a volunteer board, I met with so-and-so. Did you know this? Right? Letting people know your connections, letting people know things that you've accomplished. You need to sell yourself. Okay? It's just you have to make sure it's done in a way, again, that doesn't come across as cocky. So it's a little bit of a challenge there, but you can always try a little bit and see how it goes. Don't make the assumption they know all the great things that you do. Okay? Another piece is curiosity. When you don't know a lot, someone might be, oh, but I don't know a lot about claims. Or I don't know a lot about how does it work when it goes to the underwriter? I don't understand all that stuff. Asking questions, not all the time, but having that curious mind, asking someone, so how do you find claims? Or what's the biggest challenge you have in claims? Or when I'm working with you and one of my clients comes your way, is there something I can do that can help? What would that be? Being curious, being open, asking questions can be the most impactful way. And when you're networking, obvious one is if I'm sitting next to someone and I'm really quiet and I don't like to do a lot, but maybe I can ask a few questions. If you're sitting next to someone like me who's probably a little more talkative, I'd feel flattered that you're asking questions about me, right? So how did you get into that? Or how does that work for you? And, how are you guys doing? Or what do you think the next step would be? Or whatever it is, asking questions and being curious can actually create relationships in an extraordinary way. All right, so if we look at just the last few minutes, I think we're going to make it. Survey says, all right, so in terms of how we learn, the most effective ways to learn are actually not formal training. And I say this when I do training, because our training facilitated discussion and training is, you can do that, and essentially, if we went and all the people on the call here today, and we had a session for a day on whatever topic, you can actually see that it's called transfer of training. So the amount of things that you learn that day, and you go back and you're pumped and you're excited, and within about a couple of months, it goes down exponentially. So if you don't actually drive it home, get some coaching and mentoring and feedback around the behavior you're trying to change or the skill you're trying to try out, and you're not actually learning more on how it applies in the job, nothing matters. Training is a waste of money. So this is why it has to go back with you on the job. So on the job training, absolutely. I know in the insurance industry, it's great for doing a lot of internal training, mentorship, job shadowing. I've heard lots of stories around that. So that is absolutely by far the best. If you're going to put formal training into it, make sure when you come back from training that you either share your learnings with the team to see how you can, how can we make this work with our team or our organization, and also talked about what are the 2 or 3 things That's why I say with you guys at the end of these sessions, what are some things you're going to take away and start doing now? Because it's so easy to say, oh yeah, we did this webinar with this lady named Heather, and yeah, there was something, yes, it was pretty good. What was that about again? So how do you actually start applying it right away? So on the job, coaching, mentoring, and feedback, by far the best. The add-on is the training. So just keep that perspective in mind. So now this last bit, for the last little bit, I just want to talk about how you actually have these discussions with your manager, or how your manager has them with you. Okay, so if you're not having these conversations now with your team or with your leader, your manager, you need to start doing that. And right now, the younger generations, understanding how to get to the next level is really important. Or understanding, I want to be an account manager. I know I'm not there yet, but I need to know how to get there. Okay, it's called mapping. How do you map me from here to go over there? What do I need to do? What's my current role? Yeah, I want to be an account manager. Right? So sharing that, talking about it, discussing it, asking for feedback. The pivotal piece there is, what are the gaps, right? What do I need to do? Because sometimes when you have internal ones especially, and someone gets a job over you, some people feel really slighted. And then the question is, what was the reasoning? What was the gap that either they didn't tell you about, which is sadly mostly the case, or is there a gap there that you probably haven't filled as much as you thought you did? So getting feedback is significant for your career. And then looking at next steps that your manager can support you. So I'm just not going to whip through all these, but if you're a manager asking as an example, it would be, so, what strengths would you like to leverage more? I love that one, right? What do you do really well that we can use more of? Right? What are some other projects you could take on? What do you actually want to achieve in the next year? So what's your path? What's your career goal? Where do you want to be in the next 5 years? And it sounds kind of corny, but it's really important. The younger generations especially want to see movement. It's not just, put your time in and it's going to work out. It has to be much more tangible than that. The other piece, as a manager, I would like to hope that if you bring this up to your manager, they will also say to you, how can I support you? Right? So how can the manager help you? Maybe, for example, I have one client now who just recently asked their manager for support in terms of getting their name spoken at more of a senior leadership table, right? How can they get their name attached, which is attached to a project, spoken about? How can that leader, absolutely, the leader went up and made sure his name got landed in the conversation. So that, again, the branding starts, right? So what is it that you need to do? I just want to throw in a couple things on succession planning. I know I've talked about it briefly before, but with succession planning, I think it's something, every organization has to do, and I've actually shown the next slide as well, I think, with you guys before. Everyone needs to do it. So make the assumption, if you're on the leadership team or you're senior enough, you should ask, are you doing succession planning? Are we doing this? It's a very fluid process. It's something people should be talking about at all times. What does it mean? Okay, so I just wanted to sort of explain it very quickly. So an organization identifies their needs and their goals. So if I know as an organization, we want to do the following, we want to expand in this area, we want to change actually the type of client we're going after, whatever the heck it is. So to do that, what are the skills that our team needs to have to do it? Then we look at, okay, well, that's fair. We need to have all these skills that they need to be able to do. Then who are the people that actually are in the jobs? What are the gaps? Right? Do people transition? Then sometimes it's a matter of, are people in the right roles? Are people in the right company? Right? So they actually transition. And then there's a development piece. So we want to get all of our folks or one particular person up to a certain level to be able to take on a critical role in the next 5 years, or take on a more senior role when someone retires. You really have to assess their gaps and look at how long it's going to take to bring them up to where they need to be. So assessing talent, this is a typical 9-box grid, which I think I've shown you before. This is how succession planning starts. So when I have conversations and sessions with teams around succession planning, it's where does your team fall? As someone right now who's on this call, you want to be in the top quarter, top right corner. You want to be either, in those 4 boxes up in the upper right. You don't necessarily want to be now you can be professional subject matter expert, but you may not go anywhere there. And a solid performer may not go anywhere either, although they're perfectly legitimate. Solid performer, I say, often needs to have enhancements in their career because maybe they don't look at going to another level, right? But this is often around how do you take those critical roles of someone who's retiring in the vice president level, for example. How do you fill that role? So where does everyone fall? right? In terms of their potential along the bottom and their performance on the top. Maybe someone's new, their performance isn't there yet, but wow, they have so much potential. So then over the next, how many years is it going to take? What type of development do we need to do? Do they need mentorship? Do they need training? Do they not have their designations yet, as an example? You know, what are the things that you can do to make that rising star into the star, or potential gem that just got hired, and creep them up in terms of performance? So the key here is where does everyone land? And then what are the jobs that they could fill, right? What are the critical roles if we're looking at these people in terms of a particular role? And how long is it going to take them to get there? Well, you know, Mary's going to be 2 or 5 years. Joe's going to be maybe he might be even over 5. Someone else maybe 2 to 5 years, right? So what does that look like, and who are you going to invest your time in from a talent perspective? The one thing I wanted to throw in here as well is career ladders, or I call it career mapping, but career ladders are, and this came from the Insurance Institute, I actually tried to get something more specific for you guys. It's not actually a ladder as such, but it gives some context. So career ladders are essentially how you get from one position to another. So say you are a business support person. So you're probably in the back end, you want to be an account manager. So you actually need to know what that means. So what are the competencies that I need? What do I need to get to the next level? What specific behavior are you expecting from me? What performance level? What knowledge base? What is it that you need for me to be that? And that's what everyone needs to know. If I'm in claims, as example here, and I want to go to loss control specialist, or if I'm in business development, I've decided, I don't want to deal with these clients anymore, or these potential folks anymore. I kind of want to do something a little different. Maybe I'll go in brokering, right? In terms of the being the broker side of the brokerage, right? So what does that mean? How do I get there? And that's what the ladder is, right? Where do I want to go, and what are the gaps? The hardest part of leaders is actually having the confidence and the ability to actually tell someone, here's where you need, here are the gaps, here are all the strengths. We love those. These strengths, are important, but these are the ones that make the difference. You keep that up. That's brilliant. Here are the areas that we need you to step up in. It could be knowledge. It could be your level of confidence when you give presentations. It could be anything. You want to know how you're going to be the obvious choice when the next broker role comes up, right? You want to be that person. Or do you want to be on the account management side? Whatever it is, how do you get there? What are the specific things so that when it comes up and you get interviewed, if it is an interview process and it's not appointed, you're going to go in and you're going to say, here's all my accomplishments, and they're going to be catered to all the things that you're strong at, what the role needs, and again, the gaps that you filled, okay? So this is significant, and you need to know how it all maps out. So I've done it in your industry too, in terms of if I want to go from one side of the business to the other, what are the obvious things that you need in this role, and what are the obvious things you need in this role? And the person can look at them. Yeah, in my current role, I'm pretty well doing all that. Well, here's the stuff you need for the new role in terms of competencies and skills. And I might be, ooh, there's a few gaps in there. So that's going to be what I'm going to try to work on in the next year. As your leader, how can I help you do that? Maybe you do a course. Maybe I mentor you. Maybe someone else in the organization can mentor you. Maybe you job shadow, whatever the heck it is. It could be just getting more feedback from your boss in certain areas, okay? So last slide, though, is this sort of gives an idea of things that I would see. I didn't create this, but in terms of how you can move up. So entry-level, organization, or in an organization, pretty well some basic stuff. Let's face it, your industry, you're going to have a sense of you want people who are self-aware, they have, they maybe communicate clearly, they've got good interpersonal skills, because whether your clients are in-house or they're external, there's people, right? If nothing else in your world, I know there's people orientation. And then what's the next level up? What are the things that you need to have at that next level up? And then you go to the even higher level. What do you need to know? Like, for example, I see at the senior levels, and I would say even at the manager level, you need to have the strategic element. You need to start speaking broadly, understanding and being innovative, coming up with ideas, and planning and executing, absolutely. But again, the strategic piece as well. How do you influence and persuade? How do you get a following of people, right? Those are things that I see at the top. Again, if you don't think about those until you're ready to jump to the next level, then you probably have some gaps. So how do you fill those gaps? So, okay, I think we're a couple minutes over. So last slide is really just, you got to take control of this. This is not a world where ideally, yes, the organization would help develop all of you equally and give you all that time, but time, as you know, is such a hard commodity to get. So how do you take control of it? How do you talk to people? How do you get opportunities? How do you work with your gaps? How do you leverage your strengths? All those pieces, you've got to take control of it yourself. So I'm hoping that helped give some perspective. I know this time of year it's busy, so I appreciate you taking time out for yourself to think about your career, what it could be, and also maybe what it could be for some of your team. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks with another session. I think it's on April 3rd as our next session, I think, although Carrie will be sending out more details. Thanks very much, and if you want to put something in the chat, that would be great. You can let me know what you took away. I'm hoping you actually had some self-awareness or maybe an aha moment of something you could be doing more of. Thanks very much, folks. Have a great day.